All right, so today we're going to be talking about how to help fussy eaters and allergic kids thrive. So, today, in terms of what we'll be covering, we're going to be talking about why kids may present as fussy eaters, what nutrients and food groups matter the most, how nutrient gaps can show up in behaviour in children, the connection to food sensitivities and where it kind of all stems from, what allergies actually are, and then how to support allergic kids safely. So, in terms of fussy eating behaviors, what we see in clinic is a lot of the time children will have a zinc deficiency. In terms of research, there was a cross-sectional study done recently, I believe in 2021, that involved 203 children between 4 to 7 years old. And what they found, in terms of what they were assessing picky eating behavior, looking at their developmental level and physical activity. And zinc deficiency was definitely something that showed up with having the highest prevalence compared to all of the minerals that were assessed. And the 67.5% of those children were picky eaters with the zinc deficiency. In terms of other causes of fussy eating, I would say sensory sensitivities are definitely up there with zinc deficiencies in clinic. So, sensory sensitivities can lead to rejection of food, which may be passed off as fussy eating, but realistically, it's a little bit more deep than that. Um, in terms of the barriers with sensory sensitivities, texture, temperature, smell, the appearance of food, and the intensity of it can all really impact the child's desire to want to eat it. And in terms of the consequences of fussy eating, having a limited diet, especially in childhood when growth and development milestones are so important, can really lead to a lower nutrient status. And when we have this lowered nutrient status, that can compromise digestion and gut lining. So, our gut lining requires specific nutrients like proteins and zinc, funnily enough, alongside other things to keep it together. And, when we don't have that gut lining that's functioning appropriately, we'll generally have sort of overgrowth of more of these opportunistic bacteria, which is what we are going to refer to as dysbiosis. Um, Meaning the imbalance of good and bad, just to simplify. When we have this overgrowth of more pathogenic bacteria, we get this immune activation, which can trigger food reactions in the body. And then when we have those food reactions, we further restrict our diet and run the risk of having sort of lower nutrient status from there. So it is a little bit of a vicious cycle. In terms of the different kinds of food groups that we're looking at, we've got proteins, we've got fats, we've got carbohydrates and fiber. And what we need to do is we need to sort of look at these main groups that children are eating and assess, what are they able to eat within these groups if they are really fussy, and how can we optimize or build up if it's not enough. So, in terms of what protein does for the body, really important for, muscles, very important for brain health, neurotransmitter health, and mood, and also really important for growth and development. Um, Although not on here, protein is also really important for immune system functioning, which is a big part of this as well. Fats are in every single cell membrane in our body. It's also really, really crucial for brain health. So, about 60% of the brain is fat, and 30 to 40% of gray matter in your brain is actually made up of DHA, which is one component of the omega 3. So omega-3s, is something we prescribe a lot in clinic. A lot of kids don't eat enough fish in their diet. And if this is the case for your child, I do think that, regular supplementation is something that you should consider given how important it is for brain and cognitive health. That's also really important for energy, particularly energy storage. It's very energy dense. And so if carbohydrates and fiber are a little bit lower, your body will then burn that energy from fat instead. Fats are also really important for vitamin absorption. So vitamins A, D, E, and K are our main fat-soluble vitamins. Um, and that is purely from a transport perspective. In terms of carbohydrates and fiber, carbohydrates definitely provide the quickest energy source for your body, and it is the preferred energy source for your brain. So if kids are running around all day and they want that carbohydrate snack, you know why? Because they need to burn that energy. Um, Really important for gut health. I mean, fiber is, one of the most important things to get your bowels moving regularly. Also, really important to feed your beneficial bacteria. And both carbohydrates and fiber are also really important for heart and weight management. Now, in terms of difficulties, I believe that sort of carbohydrates, mostly in the form of vegetables and whole grains, are the thing that show up as being the most difficult for some parents, but also protein is up there as well. Um, there are definitely kids who don't like the taste and the texture of particular meats, or proteins. And both, missing both of these food groups can really impact, kids' immune function because of the way it impacts digestion, and gut health. And that can also sort of compound into food tolerance and inflammation. So, how do deficiencies present in children? If we're missing major food groups, it can show up in many different ways, having sort of low energy, persistent fatigue, poor immunity, getting sick frequently and not recovering in an adequate amount of time, atopic conditions, asthma and eczema, mood changes, those 0 to 100 outbursts that seem a little bit out of character for your child, hyperactivity, inattentiveness, poor focus, just to sort of mention a few. So, how does this all connect in terms of how your gut impacts food sensitivities? When we're looking at this image, we can see that on this left-hand side, we've got a gut that looks nice and healthy. So we have a beautiful mucus layer here, which is protecting the underlying cells of the gut. And below that, we've got that bloodstream. And with these cells, you can see in between that there are these little tight junctions that keep those cells together. Up above here, in the gastrointestinal system, we've got some good bacteria, we've got some opportunistic bacteria, we've potentially got a pathogen or two, very normal to have in low numbers. Um, and nothing is moving past into that bloodstream. And we've also got this section here, gut-associated lymphatic tissue. We've got some nice little immune cells in here, but they're looking pretty happy, not doing too much work. When we sort of have a shift in the environment, which is what we call dysbiosis, when more of those opportunistic bacteria come and in lieu of those opportunistic bacteria growing, we often have a lower level of beneficial species. We get sort of, a little bit of degradation and irritation of this mucus layer. There's some small gaps that are starting to form here. And when we have those smaller gaps, we do have some things that might pass through here and there into the bloodstream below. And so when we get this, we produce these pro-inflammatory cytokines. So that creates an inflammatory response. And it gives these immune cells more work to do because it's not supposed to be in the bloodstream. It's supposed to be absorbed adequately and not just kind of slipping through areas it shouldn't go. When we have sort of a full-on leaky gut, this mucus layer doesn't look nearly as nice as it used to. We've got much more of these pathogenic microbes that are growing. And with those pathogenic microbes, they often produce toxins. So I'll talk about LPS a little bit later. Lipopolysaccharides are one of the toxins. But there's a number of different toxins depending on the bacteria that are secreted, some more damaging than others. And again, more of this leakiness means more things passing into the bloodstream, which means more inflammation and more of an immune response. So, in terms of connecting it all together, we start off with dysbiosis, that imbalance, which creates more of that intestinal permeability where things can pass through. Then we get that immune reaction. Having this immune activation consistently can lead to food intolerances because when we have food passing through into the bloodstream, which is not where it's supposed to go without sort of um, through the proper channels, your immune system is on high alert. It notices these molecules and then it reacts to them because, again, they're not supposed to be there. You then have to eliminate these foods from your diet, and that creates more dysbiosis because when you cut out different food groups, we don't feed those beneficial bacteria as much. In terms of nutrient absorption, nutrients absorb through different mechanisms, which we won't really go into here, but it does mostly happen in the small intestine and a little bit in the large intestine. The lining, the lining of the small intestine, we have these little finger-like projections called villi, and the villi increase that surface area for the absorption. And so anything that compromises that system impairs the absorption, essentially. So, with this sort of heightened inflammation, with further bacterial infections and more of a leaky gut, we do damage to that lining, and that produces the production of enzymes. And enzymes have a really big role in breaking down foods. We lose these, what we call sort of brush border cells, that kind of, if you can imagine, like little waves that go like this and help grab onto things in the small intestine, like food particles and nutrients to absorb. It can impair those little tight junctions in between the cells. Um, we get that sort of dysbiotic microbiota and reduce sort of energy for the cells as well. So there's a lot of different things that impact nutrient absorption, but really at the top of the list, inflammation is certainly one of them. So here, when we're talking about butyrate production, our beneficial bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids, which are really incredible compounds to keep that gut healthy. When they aren't producing as much butyrate, which is an anti-inflammatory compound in itself, we do have more of that inflammation. And that creates a bit of a vicious cycle where malnutrition drives that dysbiosis, which drives more malabsorption. So, how can we support their diet, particularly when we have sort of fussy eating tendencies or food intolerances? Look at what their diet is currently like. I would start simply looking at zinc as a supplement to get started because a lot of the time I have seen time and time again that just by giving a little bit of zinc, we can really improve their taste and their smell perception, which increases that sort of desire to want to eat foods. Um, and make little tweaks. So optimize their current diet. Look at the different food groups again, see where they're getting their protein. If they are someone who doesn't like protein, how else can we get it? How can we hide it? Do they like Greek yogurt? Do they like smoothies? Can we add sort of silken tofu into the smoothies? Can we add a protein powder or collagen powder? Collagen is definitely the easiest for fussy eaters because it blends really well, doesn't have very much of a taste, if any. Um, Vegetables is another one. How can we blend them into pasta sauces? So boil your carrot, capsicum, and tomato and blend it into the passata sauce that you buy. Um, Making little egg muffins and grating things into it. Trying to, or, making sweet potato brownies. If they like sweet food, make them a sweet food, but make it healthier or see how you can add in some things to it to optimize that food. So looking at their current diet and optimizing. It's also really important to heal the gut. Another thing that I find in clinic is that a lot of children might not have much of an appetite and then maybe sort of passed off as a fussy eater because they have major inflammation and dysbiosis. When they're not feeling good, when they're sort of, gassy, bloated, constipated, or, going to the toilet every time they eat food and they don't feel good, they're not going to want to eat a lot of food. So making sure you're healing the gut is going to be an important part of that process. And so, how do we heal the gut? There's sort of a lot of different approaches you can take. Definitely looking at particular nutrients like glutamine, vitamin A and D, zinc, particularly zinc carnosine. I said glutamine. Um, Probiotics, specific strains of probiotics do have gut healing capacity. So, looking at things like Saccharomyces cerevisiae boulardii or Lactobacillus rhamnosus LGG or BB12. There's a number of different strains that will actively heal a leaky gut, as well as shift the environment to encourage more of those beneficial bacteria to grow, which creates short chain fatty acids and helps heal the gut anyway. The other thing is prebiotics. So, prebiotics feed the probiotics, and they don't feed the probiotics that we're taking, although they might, but really we're wanting to feed the native species in your child's gut. So, prebiotics are one of my favorite things to use in clinic. I use them all the time. It does take time to build up and feed them to adequate levels, but it's a super, super cheap and effective way to change the gut environment. Making sure when you're expanding their diet, you do it gradually, one food at a time, particularly for those really, really sensitive kids. And take the pressure out as much as you can by creating more of a stressful environment and pushing foods on them is going to be counterintuitive. Lead by example. So, ensure that you're trying all of these foods that you're trying to get them to eat, eating them and, showing them that you're enjoying it. Um, Monkey see, monkey do. And then if you can't get enough foods into them or they've got nutritional gaps that you can identify, supplement might be the way forward. And it's not going to be forever, taste preferences definitely change. Um, but while they have so many sort of requirements in a growing body, it might be necessary just to do some short-term supplementation. And so if you're feeling a little bit lost in that area, that is a perfect time to see a practitioner and have them sort of assess what this child might be needing, depending on the symptoms that they're exhibiting and looking at their diet as well. So in terms of supplementing, baby kids is really sort of indicated in these allergic and fussy eating children because they sort of work on that root cause. We've spent time talking about how your gut microbiome has a huge impact on immune activation and food tolerance or intolerance. So I'm going to speak a little bit to this. When we're looking at protocols for BB kids, there is an order, and starting with the repair is always going to be required in a case like this. The BB Kids Repair has these nutrients in them that really work to heal a leaky gut. So we've got these beautiful demulcent herbs like marshmallow root and licorice, which you would consider very sweet and also very slippery. And so that slipperiness that comes out of that herb feeds that mucosal barrier. Um, which helps protect those underlying gut cells and that blood sort of highway down below that. On top of that, we're looking at zinc, vitamin D, glutamine, like I was saying, all really important in that mucosal barrier and those underlying cells, including those tight junctions that pull those cells back together. And then we've got sort of beautiful probiotic strains again that have scientific research showing that they repair that intestinal lining and help other beneficial bacteria to grow. So all of this works to reduce inflammation and optimize the absorption of particular nutrients that they're getting from their diet, as well as supporting the breakdown of foods. Now, in terms of getting your children to take this, particularly if they're fussy, there has been a lot of really, really positive feedback. Obviously, one product can't suit them all, but this one is more of a tropical flavor. So adding it into things like orange juice or tropical smoothies with sort of mango and pineapple is a really good way to mask that flavor entirely if that is something that they will drink. Starting with the repair is very important before eliminating. So, if we start to eliminate when there are gaps in that gut wall, we're going to have these bacterial toxins and die-off products sneaking through the gaps and creating more of an immune response. So, it's really important to seal everything up and then get rid of everything. It's also really important to note that when we're eliminating, whether it's heavy metals, bacteria, toxins, um, we must be going to the toilet regularly. So if your child is not moving their bowels daily, it's probably something that you should work on optimizing first before you start eliminating and killing off certain things. In terms of how to get their bowels moving, think of the basics. We've got fluid, we've got exercise or movement, and fiber and fruit. In terms of the research, fruit is absolutely fantastic for constipated children, and adults alike. And it's something that is usually quite easy to get into children compared to a lot of the other things. So, in terms of adults, 3 to 5 pieces a day, a little bit less for children potentially, but fruit contains sorbitol, which draws water into the bowels and then helps things move along. So that's definitely something to consider before you jump into the eliminate, because one of the key ingredients in there is activated charcoal, and charcoal can slow the bowels down a little bit as well. So just keep that in mind. But the ingredients in here, activated charcoal, so important for binding to those toxins, which reduces that, aids in their removal from the body and reduces inflammation. And then we've got some beautiful herbs like nigella, pomegranate, turmeric. These help balance the flora or the bacteria in the gut by selectively inhibiting more of those opportunistic species whilst helping the beneficial species to thrive. So, particularly pomegranate and turmeric, they have these beautiful, rich colors. That is called polyphenols, and polyphenols are very selectively acting in the gut in terms of feeding things that need to be fed, your good bacteria like bifidobacterium and lactobacilli, but actually inhibiting the growth of those more problematic species. So really, really incredible what they can do compared to, for example, an antibiotic, which isn't selectively acting and can wipe out sort of the beneficial alongside those pathogenic. In general, BB Kids is a hypoallergenic formula, but it is important to read the ingredients. If your child has a true allergy to any of the ingredients, obviously that is something you should avoid. But in general, with a lot of those intolerant foods, thinking about things like eggs, dairy, gluten, soy, nuts, um, none of those are sort of in these formulas, so you can sort of consider yourself fairly safe. Why is it so important to run through this protocol if you have those kids with that fussy eating and sort of popping up with intolerances left, right, and center? It helps with the root cause approach um, to actually attack why they are having these food intolerances. And that is because they have potentially more of a leaky gut, which is causing immune activation and inflammation in the body. So BB Kids is again an incredible range. I didn't quite talk about the flavor of the Eliminate. So the Eliminate is berry flavored, but we've had really, really good feedback in terms of how easy it is to get into kids, and the results speak for themselves as well. All right. Thank you so much for listening, and have a beautiful day.